let's talk a little bit more about these currency notes and the electronic deposits. Let's talk about the currency note. If you pick out the currency note from your wallet, you will see that it is, it has a picture, and then there are these languages that are written on the back side of it. But if you really stare, you will find that it also says something that I promise to pay the bearer the sum of 500 rupees, signed by the governor of the RBI. There's an RBI stamp there, okay, just right here. Okay. In very small letters it says, I promise to pay the bearer, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of 500 rupees, signed by the governor of the central bank with the seal. Now, why on earth would a governor take the bother of promising something on a piece of paper and signing it all the way out with a stamp? What does the governor's promise mean here? Does it mean that if I take this note and I turn up at the governor's residence and I ask him that, hey, I've got this piece of paper which says that you have promised me to pay something. Now, could you just pay me something? Right? What's going to happen then? What the governor is going to do then, I can tell you with guarantee, is that he's just going to give me, let's say, 5 other pieces of 100 rupee notes and just take this one and give me another 5 notes of 100 rupees each, which will say pretty much the same thing. And then I can tell him it again, and then maybe he will give me 20 rupee notes or 10 rupees notes and 5 rupee notes, and it will keep on going. That is what the governor is just going to do. Is the governor ever going to give me gold worth rupees 500 rupees? Many of you would probably have this idea that the value of currency is tied to gold. Value of this, there is some gold somewhere with the RBI governor that will keep the value of this intact. And maybe theoretically I could go to the RBI or go to the governor and buy gold worth rupees 500 rupees by just showing up this note. Correct? Is that what some of you think? That is a misconception. There is no gold that is backing that. This piece of paper is called as currency, but there is a qualifier to the word currency, and that word is fiat, F-I-A-T, fiat currency. Fiat currency is basically a currency that is not backed by any gold. Currency at some point used to be backed by gold, and that was when we were in the dollar standard, and we'll talk about it more later. But in 1973, Nixon announced, the then President of the United States, announced that the value of this paper will not be tied to the value of gold. And ever since then, we have been in this era of what is called as fiat currency. It's just a piece of paper. But it's not just any piece of paper. It's a piece of paper that carries a promise by the governor. What is the governor saying? The governor is saying, I promise you. I owe you. Abbreviated as capital I, capital O, capital U. Money is basically a promise. Money is what is called as an IOU. The governor owes me. Money is the debt that the governor has. The governor is in debt of 500 rupees worth. Money is debt. Okay, that is the main headline that I want you to remember. Money is nothing but debt. Money is a promise. It's a promise. Okay, it just so happens that this particular piece of paper is a promise that I believe in, the gentleman who is sitting here behind the camera believes in, and everybody else in this economy believes in that promise, including you. Because when I come to your shop and buy something and I give you this promise of the governor, you will take this promise of the governor. You will accept this piece of the paper because you believe in the promise of this governor. That is what I was talking about when I mentioned that the money should have acceptability. Can you guess where this acceptability falls for this piece of paper? Take a guess. Where does this piece of paper not become acceptable? Anytime you go outside India, if you go to a shop in Singapore and you give this piece of paper to that guy, is he going to accept it? There's a very good chance that he will not accept it. Why? Because to that person, the RBI governor's promise doesn't mean anything. For him, the promise of the Singapore governor means something. So that person will only believe in another kind of paper. That is his IOU, that is the debt of his central government, that is what is acceptable there. But suppose if I was an American and instead of showing this rupee note to you, I was showing you a dollar, and if I asked you the same question, that if I take this dollar to Singapore, will that shopkeeper accept it? You would probably have said yes. Why? Because that shopkeeper believes in the promise made by the Federal Reserve of the United States. Is there any special love that he has for the Federal Reserve? No. He will accept that dollar because he can use the dollar in another shop, and he is very sure that the other shopkeeper will also accept the dollar, as will that shopkeeper be, etc., etc. And why? Because they all believe that dollar is a really strong currency. The stronger the currency, the greater the trust in this piece of paper and in this promise. So to come back to our promise, this piece of paper is what is called as an IOU of the central bank. The Central Bank of India, RBI, is making that promise to us. IOU of the central bank. That is what currency is. The other kind of money that I spoke about, deposits. That deposits, are these also the promises of the central bank? Think about it for a minute. What are deposits? Deposits are basically, let's say you're working somewhere, right? Your salary gets credited in a bank. How do you know it has been credited? You receive a message, and you receive a message with an updated balance. What is a balance? A balance is just a collection of digits, electronic numbers. That's what it is. Okay? How are you sure that that is your money, that you can always use that money? Well, because you can always connect your UPI to it, and somebody else can connect something else, etc., etc., etc. Money moves. But my dear, that deposit money that you have in your bank is not a promise of the central bank's governor. It is a promise of the commercial bank that you have your account with. That deposit money that you have is an IOU of the commercial bank, which is different from the IOU of the central bank. This money is the central bank's money. The money that you have in your deposit account, in your savings account, the money that you use your UPI payments with, is not the central bank's money. It's the money of the commercial bank. The commercial bank owes you that money, not the central bank. The central bank was only guaranteeing this. It's the commercial bank that has the debt when it takes your deposits. Now, you would certainly be scandalized at this revelation, because all this through your life you have been thinking that both of these two are exactly the same kind of money. And it is true, because when you go to an ATM, you punch in your debit card, you see your balance, those are electronic digits, you enter your PIN, you enter the amount that you want to withdraw, and suddenly the machine gives you the cash. But you know what is happening in that exact moment? An IOU of the commercial bank, money that is backed by commercial bank, is being converted to the money that is backed by central bank. Those are two different kinds of money that are being exchanged in that moment when the machine of the ATM makes that whirring sound. Okay. Now, if I ask you that, is that really something that you have never noticed? You probably haven't really noticed it in this way. But I'll tell you one thing that you have always would have noticed. There is always a limit on your debit card that you cannot withdraw more than, let's say, 20,000 rupees per day. Yeah? Why is that limit? There are obviously operational reasons to it, that no single person should be able to just empty out the ATM machine, etc., etc. But the fundamental reason to it is because those are two different kinds of IOUs. The commercial bank will allow you to convert your deposits to the central bank's IOUs up till a certain limit at any given point in time, but it will not allow you to go the whole distance. So up until 20,000 in a single day, you can convert your deposits, which are the IOUs of the commercial bank, to the IOUs of the central bank, which is cash, but not beyond that. It is for the same reason that the limit on NEFT transfer and RTGS transfer are far wider, because there the money that is moving around is the same kind of money. It is the IOU of the commercial banks. It may be the IOU of the SBI moving into the IOU of the HDFC, etc., etc., but it is largely just the commercial banking money. Okay. But that's a fundamental difference. Now contrast this with the other fact that I mentioned in the previous, that 5% of the total currency is cash, 95% is the deposits. So we live in a system where only 5% of the total money is the one that is backed by the central bank. The other 95% is a kind of money that is not backed by the central bank, but only a promise of the commercial bank. Is that scary? Not really. Why? Because the commercial banks themselves are regulated by the central bank. The central bank keeps a tight vigil over the commercial banking system. It is the regulator of the commercial bank. Reserve Bank of India is the regulator of all the commercial banks in India. So it keeps a close watch on what the commercial banks are doing. But is your money 100% safe? Not really. Why? Because the commercial bank can only back your money to a certain level. And you would have seen that. If there is ever a bank run, which there are sometimes, then the commercial bank suddenly says you cannot withdraw more than, let's say, 2 lakhs from your account, right? Or if there is a bank that goes bankrupt, then your deposits are only guaranteed to a certain amount. Not everything that you had in the bank will be recovered. Okay. So fundamentally, these are two different kinds of promises that we are talking about. And this is the core money. This is what really gives birth to deposits and all other kinds of financial instruments, and we will just shortly see that in the next one. But just to summarize, two kinds of money, cash and deposits, but very different in their characters. Every money, every cash is basically a debt. It is an IOU, and you can clearly see here that the proof of that is written here in this note. Take out any note from anywhere in the world, you will see this sort of a promise, because this is a promise of the central bank. But then the other majority money, which is deposits, is not an IOU of the central bank, it is of the commercial bank. But the commercial banks are under a strict regulatory supervision by the central bank. So there is no such real danger of them being that money not being recognized one day. It will always be recognized, but there are some nuances to it. They are not perfectly equal.